Internet, and welcome into this week's book club episode of Breaking Down Bloodline by Claudia Gray. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about what we have today. If you don't know what the series is, you can go ahead and click here. It'll take you back to the beginning. Basically, we're going through this book a couple of chapters at a time to discuss the greater themes and events that happen within. And this happens to be one of my favorite Star Wars books. I knew it was one of my favorite Star Wars books, and in rereading it, I've only been reminded at how much it is one of my favorite Star Wars books. But today we're going to discuss chapters 10 and 11, which are not quite as action-packed as the last couple of chapters we read. We're kind of now in that transition period in the story, for those of you who have read it before. But this time it opens with Leia talking to her team. So Leia has just been all but picked as the populist candidate for first senator. So effectively to become, leader of the Free Galaxy. Corey, who's 16, I think it said, she obviously is really excited at the idea that she could be interning for the first senator and is really excited for Leia. Greer wants Leia to run things. She trusts Leia, she likes Leia a lot. And what's interesting about Greer and Leia is so much of what they say is done with, like, a reading between the lines. Like, Greer always knows what Leia is getting at and what Leia really wants. There's always this kind of, like, secondary conversation that they're trying to have. So Leia asks, the question of, when does she no longer have to be responsible for the galaxy? Like, that's what's going on here. Leia doesn't know how long the term of first senator is going to be, but it could be a long time, and she could spend more time behind that desk than she did, in the entire rebellion and the entire war against the Empire. And so she's looking to Greer to say, should I do this? And effectively asking Greer if Greer regrets sitting behind a desk for reasons that, because we're remaining spoiler-free in the series, we do not know. And Greer knows that Leia is asking if Greer regrets what she's done with her life. Giving up adventure for what she's doing now. Greer tells her no, it's been worth it, and you should keep doing your duty. And that part of the chapter ends with Greer saying that was the first time she had lied to Princess Leia. So there's a lot to unpack there. One is that relationship of trust, one where they have been very honest with each other, that Greer now, for whatever reasons, has breached, but also this idea that Greer has this regret that she's dealing with, so much so that it's described as, some regrets you can't admit to. You can't say that you're going through. Boy, do I hope we get to the part where we learn what's up with Greer, because it's becoming increasingly difficult for me to talk about her character without spoiling it for you guys. This is just a good moment between these two women that shows this kind of mentor-mentee relationship. We've talked a couple of times about Ben in this series, because we'll talk about him again coming up. Just very natural. A woman's son would, a woman's children of any kind would come up, especially when it's a theme of what does she want to do with her life. In the same way, Last Shot, which is a novel very much about Han, is also very much about Han's relationship with Ben. What I like about this relationship with Greer is, in Legends canon, Leia had a daughter, Jaina. It is nice to see Leia kind of have this mentor relationship with a young woman. Yeah, I've said on this channel, and I've said in multiple places, I love both canons. I love the new canon, but I do love Legends canon. And it was nice seeing Leia be a mother, because mother-daughter relationships aren't as common in Star Wars. Because Lucas wrote the stories he was comfortable with writing when he wrote Star Wars, and because of it, he wrote a lot of father-son relationships, which makes sense. I'm not faulting him for that, but because of his hand being so central to what Star Wars is about, so many of the mentor-mentee relationships have been male to male, whether it be teacher or father or what have you. So it's nice to see a female character to a female character having a relationship like this, and to have someone teaching another like this. And I don't say that to bring down what we've seen in Star Wars or what we've seen in current canon, but it's nice that at least if Leia is not going to have a daughter in this canon, to at least see Leia have these kind of relationships is nice. It is another kind of good fulfillment to the character, because obviously any kind of maternal or mentor-like relationship doesn't have to be because of biology. That Star Wars is often about found family as much as it is about family, so that's totally fine. But this was just a nice moment between these two women. Then, in the chapter, Leia starts speaking to Han. Han is understandably disappointed, but to kind of go on the theme of what I was just talking about with current canon and Legends, is it was so nice to see Han and Leia have a moment that's very much a marriage moment. This is a very critical life partner moment. Leia has told her husband that she wants to go and spend time with him, and now is being pulled away by her duty. And this is something she wrestles with, and the idea of, like I said, when is Leia no longer responsible for the galaxy? When is it Leia's duty to serve the galaxy? And when does she get to say, no, I've served enough, it's someone else's turn? Which is very much a theme for Leia in this book, and very much a theme for Leia in the Legends books that are set in a similar place in time. Off and on this channel, as we have breaks in publishing, like Star Wars publishing times when, you know, we have long stretches without a new Star Wars book or something, Professor Janko and I have been reading the New Jedi Order books, which take place kind of in the same year in different universes. Not the exact same year, but close enough. And there's that theme with Han and Leia both of, hey, when is it no longer our job to save the galaxy? And those books are largely about Han and Leia's marriage too. So this is something that does not play out the same way that it plays out necessarily in the New Jedi Order and in Legends canon, but it is something that is explored there as well. So this was a really cool usage of the two universes to see something that we have seen before, but tell it in a new way. And it's one of those moments where if you've only read new canon, you can still get a lot of richness out of this book. I'm in no way saying, like, you have to know the Legends universe to get this. That's not anywhere near true. But if you have read Legends canon, there's a lot of richness in Claudia Gray's writing in any book, any of the 4 books she's written for Star Wars. She has a really good handle on what the Star Wars universe was before, and intentionally draws from that in a rich way. At least she did for Master and Apprentice, and there's just so many connections in her other books that I feel like it has to be at least a little bit intentional. So that's just I really liked this moment, and I really liked that Han was encouraging and supportive. You know, the Han we see in Return of the Jedi and the Han we see in The Force Awakens is a Han in a very different place in his life on one end or the other, either before he's really understood what a commitment to Leia means just because of time, or, you know, after they've had this tragedy with their son. Here's a point where their marriage is seemingly at its strongest, even though they're at a distance. And he is disappointed, and he is honest in his disappointment, but that he is also like, look, I knew what I signed up for. You have to go be you. And I thought it was just really nice to see them having this functional marriage when so much of their relationship, especially if you go back to like the paradigm between the two of them in Empire Strikes Back, which is bickering and this, we're gonna hide our love behind anger. Instead, it was this really honest moment between the two of them, and I really appreciated that. The end of this part of the chapter as well is also very poetic, with Leia talking about someday and how someday is this thing that they don't think they'll ever reach. For when do they get to just be them? And it's really tragic because knowing where the sequel trilogy goes, they probably never did get there someday. Which is, this book is so beautiful and poetic, but there's also this, as much as you're having fun and as much as the story is going so well, it's so laced with tragedy. Now we jump perspectives and we go to Lady Carisi. Never sure I'm saying her name right, but her perspective. And it's so great to go from like 2 really sentimental points of view, where she's just like, Gray is just like hitting you with the feels, to then go to this perspective, which is just downright comical. And I love the way this is written, because we're seeing it from this other perspective of, you know, why wouldn't Leia want her title, and isn't royalty the greatest? And she's interpreting everything Leia does in this part of the book. But we know what Leia's really doing, and like the way Gray writes Leia's dialogue we get what Leia's really doing, and we see how this woman is completely misinterpreting Leia. But this is a woman who sees conspiracies everywhere. So, you know, it starts off, she's talking to Casterfo, and Casterfo's like, oh, hey, say hi to Leia for me, and her mental wheel starts spinning like, why would he say that? And doesn't he know that Leia can't really be blah, blah, blah? And, you know, she's freaking out. And then, you know, she's freaking out about why Leia doesn't want the title. And just everything with her is a constant jumping at shadows, which, again, is just creates this character that you really don't like very much, or at least I don't really like very much, but I love reading, if that makes sense. I enjoy every part where she's on the page, even though I don't like her. I mentioned that we were going to talk about Ben here. Of course, Leia is talking about how her taking over the governorship doesn't really make sense. She isn't as interested in it, and she specifically says that Ben wouldn't be interested in ruling, which is interesting just because he does end up as Supreme Leader, which goes into other theories I have about Kylo's motivations and whether or not he truly does want to rule the galaxy, or if he just no longer wants the galaxy to rule him. But that's a topic for a completely different video, and videos I have done on here before. But that was just one of those fun irony lines. And then, of course, the other bit that is here that really good POV writing that I was describing is when Carisi says, you know, it'd be so good to have a hands-on job, and Leia reacts, and she doesn't know why Leia is reacting, but we know why Leia is reacting to this hands-on job, as if Leia has suddenly regretted the decision she's made. Is just really, really well done, really well put together. The final part of this chapter, we get from Joff's perspective. He's in the hangar, and Snap Wexley is there. How the heck are you, Snap? I actually forgot Snap was in this book, but that's so cool. Snap Wexley is, of course, Temmin Wexley from the Aftermath series that we did in this book club before, and, of course, is the character we see in The Force Awakens, so it's kind of cool to have him in there, both as a movie connection and as a past book connection. The Aftermath trilogy was coming out when this book was published. This book was published, I think, in between Life Debt and Empire's End. If not, at least the very first Aftermath was already out, so it would have connected in both directions there. Joff is, of course, getting ready to watch the Five Sabers race, which is the race that Han is involved with. He wants to go watch, and Greer is there. And she claims she doesn't want to watch the race, but she's also there. And so Joff starts to see that there's something going on here. Like, Greer has some sort of interest in this. Which goes back to this ongoing mystery of why doesn't Greer fly. Joff kind of lets it be, and then Leia shows up in this hangar. I really liked her line when they were like, we're just drinking coffee, calf as it's called in space. And Leia's like, well, when I was in the rebellion, our pilots knew how to make good hooch. Which was just, I could just hear Carrie Fisher saying. It was a really cute moment, and then that gets Greer to come over to watch the race, and then Leia and Greer again have this psychic conversation that they're able to have, and Joff overhears it, and basically volunteers to go with Greer on a mission. Leia is sending Greer out to follow up on what is going on with the lead on Daxam 4, because Leia is a little bit busy now running for First Senator. So that takes us to Chapter 11. Joff and Greer go to Greer's homeworld, which is this really cool planet that I can never pronounce correctly because I can never pronounce anything in Star Wars ever. But it's basically like this island chain that's connected by all of these bridges. It's horrible. It would be my worst nightmare. I hate waves. I really, really, really hate waves. Like, I can't even watch movies with waves in them without getting a little freaked out. Like, I will never watch Interstellar because there's that giant wave in the trailer, which I will not put in this video because I don't want to look at it. So for me, this planet is horrifying, but I'm sure it seems cool to anybody else. And I really like this idea of, you know, Greer had to learn how to operate a boat before she was able to, or before they taught her to operate a ship. This idea that, you know, you have to learn the sea before you can learn space. You got this really great sense of a very rich culture really, really, really fast. And that's the part that impresses me the most. Like, in just this chapter, I feel like I understand Greer and where Greer came from so much better just from a couple of pages. Just because the description of how all of this works is so evident in the world itself. So that was really impressive. Part of that is poor Joff is getting seasick just from walking on the bridge, which would be 100% me. And then they go to the bar, And the barkeep is like, yeah, sure, you guys are totally not off-worlders or anything. And so he goes to make Joff drink Port in the Storm, which Greer just takes right down. Joff, who likes to think he's tough, thinks he can take it. But Port in the Storm is an intense drink, as we will see later. Yeah, but they basically hang out. They're listening to the din in the bar, now fully accepted because Greer was able to throw back the local brew. One thing that was interesting here that is not necessarily relevant to the story of Bloodline, could be, you know, but they overhear a line of, there's got to be an Imperial Fleet out there somewhere, which at the time was just a cool connection to the Aftermath trilogy. Also a cool connection to Claudia Gray's first Star Wars book, Lost Stars. I don't want to spoil it because I know there's a few people watching this who would really like Lost Stars if they haven't read it, but Lost Stars connects to Aftermath in a certain way and also ends at the Battle of Jakku. So Claudia is both referencing her own writing as well as the Aftermath trilogy, but in light of the trailer for The Rise of Skywalker, and especially what we saw in the D23 footage with the Imperial Fleet, just kind of an interesting thing to see where they really were doing what they said they were doing and laying seeds for all of this stuff way back from the beginning. But the line that really matters, and the line that they really stick on, is Greer and Joff over here, somebody talking about needing pilots for a job. So Greer and Joff are like, hey, we can super do whatever job you need. Actually, I really liked, I just see in my notes here, before they got to the relevant line, Joff was just really into somebody talking about pie. I really loved that. Like, they're here, they're trying to do the spy mission, and Joff is like, pie? I forgot how much I liked his character until I started rereading this, and I'm like, oh, you cute little space boy with your love for pie. They hear about somebody looking for pilots on Daxam 4, and that's where they hear about the Amaxines? Amaxins? Amaxins? I feel like it's probably pronounced Amaxins, but it looks like Maxines, like the name Maxine, so I don't know how to say it, and that they need pilots, so they get told how to go get a job there. Then they're walking back, and when they're walking back, this is where Greer explains to Joff, who has not figured out that they've been on a covert mission this whole time, that they're on a covert mission. There's the explanation of how Leia is not supposed to use her office for espionage, which is why Leia talked to Greer in the hangar, because then she's not doing espionage in her office, which is such a true from a certain point of view thing. And it was just a cute moment with these two bonding. Then we go back to Leia. Leia is tired. Leia is dealing with everyone and anyone who wants a piece of her, now that she's potentially going to be first senator. And then she ends the day with Carisi visiting her again for paperwork on handing over the governorship. Because that's what had happened earlier in the first chapter, is Leia said, hey, I don't want to be governor of Burin, or whatever the name of the planet is. You should be governor. It makes way more sense for you to be governor, because she doesn't want it and Ben doesn't want it. So Carisi shows up to make that official. And so we get it from Leia's perspective, and Leia is taking her time to like troll this woman who's also kind of her opponent, to say, you know, oh, I'm sure the centrists, because they're just so good at order and centralizing things, like already have their candidate and stuff when they totally don't. And so from Leia's perspective, it's so ironic that the populace, who are all about individual ability, who are often characterized for disorder, already have their candidate, and the centrists can't agree because they're all power hungry. But then we flip back to Carisi's perspective, and I really liked how, in Carisi's mind, it's like, well, no, obviously there's only one competent populist, and that's Leia. The reason why the centrists have this problem is because there's so many talented people from the centrists, which just goes into the nature of politics in general, and why so many people could possibly think they're right when other people think they're right. Because as a, you know, what I told you was true from a certain point of view is a big thing in Star Wars, and a big thing in real life also. As Carisi gets on the ship, she thinks about how she would have been a pilot if she wasn't royal, but of course she's royal, so why would she think about such things? It was a good kind of sympathetic moment to have. You see this character, and you see this character who's so focused and almost brainwashed into liking what she likes. Not really brainwashed, because I think she did it to herself, but it was kind of neat to have that layer of that she would so flippantly think about something like this. And the last lines of this chapter are really intense. That the strength of the centrist worlds would be revealed like a sword finally being pulled from their scabbard, and that she, Carisi, would be one of those who brought the day to dawn. Which I'm just going to leave there as an interesting quote to keep in mind. But I'm not going to say why. But it's an interesting thing to take note of. Also, it's just absolutely beautiful writing. There's a lot of really poetic lines throughout these 2 chapters that I just simply, if I had spent time on all of them, this would have been a video that was 10 minutes longer. So I never get to talk about as much as I want to talk about from these chapters, so I really like hearing what you guys pick up on and what phrases you guys pick up on. So on that note, please leave a comment letting me know what you thought of today's reading. If you're not already, follow us on all the socials. I'd love to talk to you guys there. For next week, we're going to read chapters 12 and 13. We're continuing to read 2 chapters a week pretty uniformly until we're done. So read the next 2 chapters, 12 and 13, and I will talk to you guys next week.